In this next chapter, we're going to be looking at the social institution of the media and how it influences the way we think about the social world. And of course, we're going to be looking at its effects on how we think about race and ethnicity. We'll be considering the media in this chapter and how it influences the way we think about different racial groups. I'd like to pause for just a second and have us think about how we're socialized and the media's effect on us. Storytelling is the great process that makes us recognizably human. A story is an attempt to make the invisible visible. It has to do with relationships, with intellectual connections. We learn about the social world through two ways: through our direct experiences and through stories. Think about all the stories we're told as children. It might be through lullabies, through children's books, through music, through movies, TV, videos, or even through religion. We learn as much and possibly a great more through stories and the lessons learned through those stories as we do through direct experience. Stories are a main socialization tool for the young and the old alike. So then we have to ask, what are these stories? How is the media shaping ideas about racial groups? How do we weave them into the very complicated, uniquely human structure called culture? We'll examine the social institution of the media in this chapter and the importance of the stories we hear through the media relating to race and ethnicity. When we talk about the media, we're referring to it as a social institution, which has been shaped over the past several hundred years by the development of certain technologies. There is media, which is referring to the manner in which we transmit ideas, beliefs, thoughts, and ultimately that shapes our culture. We also refer to something called the mass media, which has the ability to send messages and ideas to large amounts of people very quickly. When we refer to the media, most people think of radio, television, newspapers, magazines, and the internet. But the media includes music, podcasts, and movies. The words, the sounds, the images that we see in the media convey strong messages and have a strong influence in what we believe and how we're socialized. Society is highly influenced by these images, and some sociologists would claim that the media is a mechanism to maintain the ideological state apparatus, which allows those in power to subtly control society. How the media presents racial groups and the messages conveyed through that presentation has a strong influence in what we believe and how we think. The various medias in the U.S. are controlled by a handful of companies, and almost all of these are controlled by wealthy white men. The way the media presents racial groups communicates a culture's underlying thoughts and feelings about those racial groups, and at the same time has the power to shape ideology. Members of one culture define other cultures against their own, a process called othering. Who is defined as the other and the light that they are presented in regarding their status as the other to millions of people will have an impact on how that category of persons is thought about by society. Think in terms of the contrast of the images shown in the 1800s and the message those images and stories had versus the images and stories that we're being told in the second millennium. So the concept of a mediated account is something that is important to understand. To mediate something means that the information is carefully picked and presented in a way that tells a specific story. How the story is told and what facts are selected makes us feel a certain way about different groups of people. Not just the information that is reported, but the pictures and the images that are displayed will have an effect on how we think about a certain event. Who owns the media and who supports the media financially has an impact on what stories are told and what ideologies are presented. The issue here is that the media is generally not an unbiased, objective entity. There are big interests at stake. Ownership and financial support guide those interests. The media has changed enormously over the past 100 years due to technology, with more financial support needed for the main carriers. You can see the incredible concentration and control that occurred in the 1950s and the 1960s, with only 3 main networks controlling the majority of the television content. You can also see the incredible amount of change that has taken place in the last 50 years, with the dismantling of that concentration through cable TV and internet content delivery. A historical perspective of the media in this country would consider the different messages that have been delivered in the past 150 years. Since the 1800s, the media has been a source of images and associated thoughts for different groups. Minstrel shows and movies like The Birth of a Nation depicted African Americans in the 1800s and 1900s as savages and criminals. Native Americans were depicted as wild savages in westerns, and usually were overly simplified without much account for the 2,000 different cultures of indigenous peoples in the New World. The scripts and depictions often were developed to support preconceived notions of who these groups of people were, rather than delivering accurate information. Often Latinas and Mexicans or Mexican Americans are lumped into one group, again denying the cultural differences and ethnicity represented by different groups. Latinas tend to be underrepresented in the media as well, usually accounting for between 1% to 3% of the character roles, when in fact this group represents about 12.5% of the population. Characters are often not the hero of the story, but rather depicted as less than desirable individuals.